So this brings us to our guest this morning. He is a teacher, originally by qualification, spent a number of years teaching, and also was a community youth worker. If you're looking at him and like that thing of the public-private comparison, if you're thinking, well, how can he empathize with people who on a daily basis have to lead a clientele that can be impulsive, inattentive, easily distracted, emotional? He did spend a lot of time as government chief whip, so there's a certain level of empathy there. It is an apt time that he comes to talk to us because he is newly appointed but long enough in the position to have had a chance to read himself in and have a sense of what his intent is and what the issues are in play. So it'll be very interesting to hear from him. Will you please welcome the Minister for Education and Skills, Joe McHugh.
Oh, I want something just like this. How's it going? I'm really delighted to be here, and I must say, David, I'm really impressed by your team's research. I arrived into the wee room behind the curtain, and the next thing I was on the phone to my children at the time, and the next thing the Killers came on with that song, my daughter's favourite song. So we were on the phone, that was on. So obviously you've been doing a lot of research into my background. So I'm quite impressed. David, Pádraig, Damien, Anton, and colleagues and friends, people who I've met and people who I know, or people might know me, and people who I haven't met and I hope to get to know in the not too distant future. Once this calendar date came on the horizons before Christmas, it was something I wanted to be at, so I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I also want to acknowledge my officials who are with me here today, and I want to thank you as leaders in your respective positions for the warm welcome you've given me in the short term that I've been in this job. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to immerse myself in the job, and I think the only way I can do that is to get into the staff room, drinking those cups of tea and eating those lovely scones. So if the kettle's on, I'm happy to get in there, because that's the place where I'm learning what's happening. I'm watching, I'm monitoring, and I'm also observing enormous change that's happening within the school system. As Anton pointed out, I was a secondary school teacher nearly a quarter of a century ago. I'm not going to talk about that because there's been so much change in the meantime, but I want to talk about the time I spent as a community youth worker. That was a time when I started fully appreciating the link between community, between family, between households and the primary sector. And when I was running a homework club, it was a very deep insight into the supports that are needed in the family home to ensure that the work that you're trying to do in that more limited time period within the classroom to bring progression and to bring sustainability into the learning of all individuals within the classroom. The fundamental message I'm picking up when I go into the classrooms is you want to allow your teachers to teach, and you want to provide the opportunity for your children to learn. And that is very, very obvious. And I think the IPPN is hitting the nail on the head in terms of what it's trying to do within the primary forum. And I want to acknowledge the role that you played as an organisation calling for that primary forum. David, you and your colleagues, you were the first group that called for it. I've been to one meeting already. I can see the value of it, and I can see the enormous value in bringing different representation into one room who collectively are on the same hymn sheet in terms of trying to advance new solutions to learning, and obviously looking at the strengths as well as the weaknesses. I met a lady from Connemara in Boston a number of years ago, and she introduced me to a beautiful shanachal from Connemara. She reckoned it originated in Connemara. The people meet, but the hills and the mountains don't. So the importance of you having these opportunities to meet with each other, learn from each other, get an insight and develop that peer-to-peer and one-to-one learning. That's something I've got convictions in that department, and I also have convictions in the area of experiential learning that you talked about, David, but also of lifelong learning. If we're looking at an evolving classroom, changing society, you obviously have to adapt as well. So continuous professional development is critical, and it's at the cornerstone of what I'm trying to do as well. Now that it is a reality that the Primary Education Forum is up and going, I share the same great hopes as you for its development into the future. I believe that by working together, we can achieve much more, and the forum is the ideal way to address the pressures that face you as principals, including the day-to-day workload. Already, the forum has delivered a re-sequencing of change in key areas such as the introduction of the new primary maths curriculum. And re-sequencing was one of those many buzzwords that have come across in my new job as Minister for Education and Skills. But I'm delighted that, David, that you have explained it to me in common sense language, not to be too trigger happy with introducing things at that. So thanks for that, David, that's much appreciated. And also you acknowledge the fact that the commencement of the remaining sections of the Schools Admissions Act will be sequenced as well. So I will work with you on that, and it's something that my officials are very conscious of as well, and will continue to engage. To all the doors that have been opened in the primary schools, and you know, I've been to a lot, but I haven't been to anywhere near the ones that I want to get. Time is a limitation. I was working on the policy of starting at the top and working my way down the country, but I think that would take about 10 years, and I don't think the confidence in supply is going to allow us the time to do that. So to all the people that have opened their doors, and in the last week I've managed to get to Kilkenny, I've also managed to get to on a number of occasions and to different schools in Dublin. I just want to thank you for that very warm welcome. And so whether it was Aideen Kelly, who I met last week in Dorset Street in inner city Dublin, or Cathy Egan during the week down in Mooncoin and Kilkenny. I was teaching the Kilkenny ones a wee bit about hurling and stuff like that. Or whether it was Irene Simmons and her team up in Letterkenny last Friday, for allowing me to get in and to get a feel for the enormous change that's going on. And each of the schools I go to, in Mooncoin, the skipping ropes out, and in Letterkenny there was peer-to-peer learning where the older students were helping out in the PE with the younger students, and to get that sense of the enormous change around the internationalisation of our schools as well in inner city Dublin and throughout the country. That's something that I want to get more of an insight, and I look forward to working with you on that. Special education, you mentioned, David, a new allocation model has been developed. It is designed to create a fairer system, and a model that was bought into in 2017. And I know you want certainty and you want clarity in relation to when this is going to happen. So I'm hoping that these allocations, these changes to these allocations will be made in the coming weeks. At the same time, we should remember the investment by the government in special education. We spend 1.75 billion on special education, which is up 42% since 2011. And I know that your appetite for embracing change, and if you think on the number of special classes going from less than 500 in 2011 up to nearly 1,500 across the primary and secondary sector. And your big shout out today for special schools, David. I'm delighted you did that. I met with 3 leaders from Cork during the week who were in special schools, and they gave me a very deep insight to the many challenges that they face. So there are practical suggestions coming out from your IPPN research and consultation, and it's something I want to work with you on as well. Since 2017, 1,000 additional special ed teachers have been provided for schools. There's over 900 special classes in your own primary system, and this is something that I want to continue to work with you and monitor. And I know you have a key role as principals, whether it's the nearly 16,000 SNAs now that we have within the entire system, but you're looking at the all-school inclusive model of teaching, and that requires a lot of leadership. That requires facing enormous change, and whether we're in the lifelong learning space or experiential learning, your continued professional development is critical. And that's why it's so important that we continue to resource the Centre for School Leadership. Leadership was mentioned up the front here again this morning. Leadership is key. It's one of your major themes for this conference. Since 2015, partnership with the IPPN, and also like to acknowledge the representation from the NAPD today. 517 postgrad courses since 2015. You mentioned the coaching service, David, 547, and also the mentoring service for principals, upwards in 500. So that is an incredible momentum that's happened in a space of 2 years, and I want to fully embrace the opportunities that we can provide for you as principals. I'm also very aware that more than half of all primary schools have teaching principals, and that the role of full-time duties as teachers and the role of leading and managing schools can be extremely challenging. I'm very conscious of that. Budget 2019 supported school leadership by providing an additional release day for teaching principals and a further 4 additional release days for teaching principals in schools with special classes. As you're aware, there are also arrangements in place for schools to cluster their principal release days into a full-time post, which will assist teaching principals to more effectively plan their release days for the benefit of the school. Building on the level of release days provided in recent budgets is one of my priorities as Minister, and I want to see I really appreciate that intervention because I had a runny nose here, so thank you. Thank you very much. But words are words, and action is action. And I want to see something meaningful happen here, and I will work closely with the IPPN towards making this happen. It's been a dominant theme in my visits to the schools over the cup of tea and the scone bun, the whole idea of that extra day. So my officials are aware of my motivation in this, and I think we can allow a bit of space to try to see how we make this happen in the future. And when I say future, I don't mean the future way out there. We need to make this happen as soon as we possibly can. I would like to commend the IPPN for their valuable work with One Teacher Schools, and that the heart of your campaign was the health and safety of your principals in One Teacher Schools, and also the well-being of the teacher. This informative work has highlighted circumstances where One Teacher Schools may not have a second adult present during part of the school day or week. I have asked my officials to write to the schools affected so that they can help to identify where there are gaps. Letters to those schools were issued yesterday. My department will work with those schools to achieve the outcome of having a second adult present during the school day, and I know this was a priority for the IPPN, and I am glad now that we've moved to make the steps, to put the steps in place to resolving this issue. So thank you once again. You mentioned teacher supply, David. I know it's a big issue, and it's pertinent in the primary school sector, and I know that it relates mostly to the recruitment of substitute teachers. Management bodies and schools are reporting difficulties on a daily basis. The steering group on teacher supply was established in March 2018. It is considering the issues that impact on teacher supply and overseeing a programme of actions. And to show the seriousness of the department, it's chaired by the Secretary General, who's with us here today as well, and I want to acknowledge the work that you've done together as partners on ensuring that the action plan for teacher supply was published on the 8th of November 2018, and 22 actions under a number of policy headings. For example, the restrictions that teachers on career break may be employed were suspended for the 2018-19 school year. The potential use of substitute teachers, supply panels, is under consideration and has been discussed with the INTO. The potential for removing the restriction on job sharing teachers undertaking substitute work is also being explored. An additional €1 million will be allocated to the Student Assistance Fund for professional Masters of Education students who are experiencing financial difficulty, and a national campaign to promote the teaching profession was launched in December 2018 through digital, social media, radio and new website. We as officials, or me as a politician within the department, we don't have all the answers in this area, and if there are further practical, clever, creative ways of moving on this issue, we're willing to work with you. And I know it's not as simple as just reaching out to the UAE or reaching out to the southeast of England. There are challenges in terms of trying to attract people back here, and I'm willing to work with you on that as well. So if there are further ideas around that, my Doras Oscailche Lishin. Agus bhhailm má bhuíos a ggóil fáhanne an Chimanta agus an Galtain is chuig an teanga dhéalaige. That promise and that commitment to the Irish language within the primary school sector, it's just something that I hold very, very dearly. And as somebody who has gone back to learn Irish in the last 4 years, I can see what you're trying to do. I can see the creative and clever ways within the primary school sector, be it through creative role play, through group work. And I was in a primary school on Friday, and I would come into the role play. I was invited in for to have a cup of plastic cups of tea and plastic bread and plastic butter. But I sat with a group of 8 children, and we had a great sit down, and they were having fun. Agus chorbe cheist chig na daltaí scoile. I put in the one question, and the poor teacher was petrified, because that one question that you ask a class, a wultuig bun sultas, are you enjoying yourself? And the teacher, vishi inta nervisha ganam. And one after another, they said, Tamwe ag bun sultas, I'm enjoying it. And you could see it in their eyes. You could see that whole conversational group work way of creatively exploring the language, and I know there's a lot of schools doing it in different ways throughout the country, and it's something that I want to acknowledge. In relation to the primary curriculum change, I want to harness the creativity, whether in the area of language or arts or music, that's going on in your classroom, because the difference I see compared to a quarter of a century ago in the teaching profession, you're delivering, your work is ensuring that we have really, really confident, self-confident young people coming into the secondary school sector by going drama, getting them to stand up in the class, making presentations, doing research, doing work on their own. It's just phenomenal what's going on, and I want to acknowledge you for that. The positive change is already happening in the classroom, and I want to embrace that. And as part of this work, the NCCA is engaging widely and stakeholders in education and other interested individuals and groups. This includes working directly with schools on your priorities and needs for a redeveloped primary curriculum. And your students are grappling with the big issues of our time, whether it's environment, whether it's migration, whether it's the Sustainable Development Goals, or dealing with plastics, microbeads. You're bringing all those issues and leading on those issues, and the generation of young people that are in your classrooms, they are the people who will be providing us with the answers in the not too distant future. There are now over 200 languages being spoken in Ireland. Given the importance of language skills and communication in education, it was felt that the initial change would need to come from an integrated languages curriculum. The primary languages curriculum is a curriculum for all children in all contexts, and the PLC recognises the linguistic diversity present in modern-day Irish classrooms and builds on the language knowledge and experiences that children bring to school. The PLC has the same curriculum structure and components for English and Gaeilge to support integration and the transfer of skills across the two languages. It is aligned with the principles and methodologies of ASHR, which emphasise is the use of play-based approaches to learning, and it has a learning outcome focus as opposed to the learning objectives focus of the 1999 curriculum. So I want to continue in allowing and facilitating your voice to be heard in this process. I believe that more time needs to be given to allow the values of this new curriculum and the learning outcomes model to embed in our schools. And it is for that reason that I have made the decision to delay the implementation of the primary mathematics curriculum. And as you know, the Education Admissions to School Act 2018 was signed into law by the President in July 2018. A number of sections were subsequently commenced in October of last year, and this Act will help to support schools in ensuring that their admission processes are transparent and fair, and this will help parents with a greater understanding of their work. My department will shortly be beginning the process of consultation with the education partners, who I also want to acknowledge here today, on the drafting of regulations. This will, or the education centres that I want to acknowledge here today, this will involve important feedback which will help to ensure that regulations work for both schools and for parents. I also was listening attentively to you, David, when you were talking about the issues around child protection. I also am listening attentively to you talking about the progression that's available in schools, in leadership capacities, posts of responsibility. Because if we're serious about training you and giving you the professional training, there has to be incentives for other people in your classroom. And that progression is in the form of positions of responsibility. And I want to continue to work with you on that. I know it's a big piece of work. That's not going to happen to get it all completed today or tomorrow, but we have made progress. The 1,300 positions that we have already delivered on, but it's something that we need to be very conscious of. And if we're in the space of developing the skill set, providing you with the expertise, we also need to be looking at the leadership of other people within your school environment. And I know that's something that's coming from you, and from speaking to different principals, you're looking in that space as well. So I want to work with you on that. You mentioned the backstop, David. I was going to reference it anyway, just to acknowledge the fact that on the border, there are schools opening their doors to people on to young people on both sides of the border. So there's a natural, organic movement of people over the last 2 decades. And my responsibility in government, along with my colleagues, is to continue, not just to continue to allow it to continue as present, but to build on that movement, and it's something I'm very committed to. So to all the schools along the border, I want to acknowledge your work in that regard. I know it is a burning issue at the moment, but we will ensure that the premise of the Good Friday Agreement, which we all democratically voted on, both North and South, is protected, to ensure that we will find a sane and practical solution in the not too distant future. You also mentioned resilience, and I know it was a theme of your evenings and your deliberation yesterday evening. I came across the definition for resilience as Gaeilge recently, and it was once again somebody from Connemara that introduced it to me. Teacht Níor, coming from the West. It's not a one-word. The Irish language, as we're all aware, is more descriptive than just one word to describe something. Teacht Níor, coming from the West, was the old Irish way of describing resilience. So look, if you're not from Connemara or West Kerry or West Donegal, don't panic, because I think it meant actually west of Britain. So we're all included. So you're grand, David. West Dublin's included in that as well. You're all right. And we only have to think back to the footprint, the global footprint of the people who have went before us. The great leaders, the great educators, the missionary work in Africa, the hundreds and thousands of people that have made such an impact globally, coming from large families in this country where everybody couldn't stay. But people needed that resilience. People needed that, those coping skills that we talk about today. People needed to deal with issues such as anxiety. And we now are looking to you as the leaders in that space. And whether it's dealing with anxiety, dealing with coping skills, dealing with different circumstances at home, and I'm also interested to hear about your research on homelessness. It's something that I'm very keen to work with my government colleagues and continue to work with government colleagues on. We have to look at that resilience piece, but you're providing that and you're standing up, stepping up to the mark to provide that leadership. And one other thing that I'm picking up very, very, very strongly in the classroom is the dignity piece. The basics of care, the basics of human looking after each other in the area of compassion and empathy. And 1,500 years ago, Columbanus left Bangor County, St. Columbanus left Bangor in County Down and made it as far as Bobbio in Italy. And if you're ever in Rome, or some people may have seen the inscription, I haven't seen it, but there is an inscription dedicated to Columbanus. If you take away somebody's dignity, you take away their freedom. And you're working really, really hard on that dignity bit, and it's something that I'm conscious of. And that dignity doesn't just stay in the classroom. It's how I interact with you in my position. It's how I interact with my officials. It's how I treat them. It's how I expect to be treated myself. So that whole communication bit, respect bit, and dignity is something that I want to continue with, and I want to ensure that I stay in touch with you in my period as Minister for Education and Skills. Agus ma ocal scur, tan shan ocal, Jeran and shan ocal skach chéile a warin na dinne. We live in each other's shadows. Agus tan dulgis or in the lig. We have that responsibility, goji and ked glunella, towards the next generation. Agus bawaila ma ahantas a gol hugav for honya and dulgish. I want to acknowledge your responsibility. Ta shifshin the dinye fragra as an gulter, our nairacht, agus, our changa. You are the people in charge of our culture, of our heritage, of our legacy, and of our language. Agus ta shivshe agyanu fear iracht. You are the people making the effort on that. Tandulgish orms and takiat a goal hugav. My duty is to give my efforts and my work and my help towards you. And Shinnan Galtanis, Ayani Misha and you. That's a promise I make. August Fanny Jagwell, to my Doris Osculcha, to my Gol Frigian, ag thrower eye, Frigian the Skull, Scapius the Cheer Shaw, August be me inte Sasta, Leshan Erit, August and Sar Oberjanta, Leshan IPPN, Mila Buiachs, go to Mila Maigavalig. Thank you very much.
Now I've gotten to stand here for 2 standing ovations in one morning. What a day. We have a couple of questions, as I said, that principals have sent in for you. So let me just give them verbatim as they came in. We'll start with the one that I put to David. It's from Linda Dennehy from Scully, Scone and Mallow. And to give you the full of it, the scheme to allocate additional supports to schools in disadvantaged areas, DESH, was reviewed in 2017. However, There wasn't transparency in the list of schools added to the scheme, and many schools and principals felt they were overlooked in the review. Will you ensure that department officials understand the new criteria so supports will be given in a manner that is fair, transparent, and in line with the deprivation index generated on public maps based on the census 2016?
Yes, I will. Yeah, look, I think without going over the ground, David talked about the JESH scheme, Anton, has been a phenomenal success, and the worry at the time, would it provide stigma or introduce stigma? As David pointed out, every school wants to have those supports, and the balancing of JESH and non-JESH schools has just been, the evidence is pointing to it. So what I want to do is, I want to continue working now with my officials. We're doing an audit, we're using all sorts of measurement from GIS and looking at all the data that we have. And we want to introduce a system that's targeted. And there will be areas, it's not just a geographical area here and there. We want to target it, but also we want to do it in a gradual way as well. And I know, look, there's people from different parts of the country saying they want to be part of this, and it's hard, for example, where there's maybe in one town, maybe every school bar one school is getting JESH status and maybe the primary school isn't, and I get that, and it's something that we have to just be more targeted, but also we have to be gradual in the new implementation. So we'll first quarter, end of the first quarter of this year, we're looking at compiling all the data that we're bringing in.
And what are the issue of transparency? Will the methodology be evident to the people on the receiving end, the people implementing?
Yeah, we're going to be as open as possible, and I think again, it's tried to put into practice the words that I'm using here today is, how we do this collectively together, and it's been mature enough, trying to be mature enough as a society that you have representation and a representative organisation here. You know the score. We need you to be at the heart of these changes.
Okay, another one then from Aideen Nihul, who is principal in Castleknock Educate Together. National shortage of teachers well known at this stage. What does the Minister advise schools to do in the event that all means of advertising have been exhausted in an attempt to recruit personnel to no avail?
Yeah. Look, it's a difficult one, and it's really, really disappointing, to hear today that principals who want to be here can't be here because of substitution issues, and that's the reality of what we're faced with. Now, we're trying the marketing campaign, we're trying to get the information out there, we're trying to entice new people in, we're even giving them support, another €1 million to students who are in training and all that, but that doesn't solve the problem for next week or the following week. And as I said here today, if there's practical ways we can do that and be a bit more creative in trying to, like, we have a lot of teachers southeast of England, UAE, and as a former teacher in the UAE, Fido. I'm not saying everybody was in the same position as me, but I had a yearning all the time to get back home if the circumstances were right.
Well, that thing of the sort of flexibility and the creativity, because the subhead to what Aideen was asking was that the inspectorate criticised a school for using support staff to cover mainstream teacher absences, but the school had already used every possible attempt to recruit teachers. Yeah,
well, there's a couple of pieces of work we're trying. We're in discussions, for example, teachers who job share. Is that an area which we can make progress? That's one example. So they're the ways that we're working on that, and I think we'll have to try to make that happen.
Okay, we'll take one final one, which is from Garrod Rowan, and apologies if I mispronounce your second name, Garrod, but he's principal in Scoil Chríost in Ennis in Clare. Special education teacher hours allocation for 2019-2020 under the new model is due to be shortly announced, and many schools are due to lose hours based on the formula used 2 years ago. The profile of many schools has changed in the last 2 years in that more children require special education training. Therefore, what's going to happen in relation to SET for these schools and those who were told they would lose support, and when can we expect an announcement?
Okay, just to be very clear on that one, the decision was, the system changed in 2017, so if we're looking at an allocation model, which we will be in September of this year, 2019, it will be based on up-to-date current profiling. It won't be what the profile was in 2017, so it's going to be current, it's going to be updated, but I'm also conscious of one very important thing. I don't want a shock to hit the system here, because if a shock hits the system, that becomes a problem for the class, for the school, and I'm looking at ways, I'm working really, really hard with my officials to ensure that doesn't happen, and I'm hoping to be in a position to give clarity and certainty on that in the coming weeks.
Can I ask you one just to wrap up then, just slightly more broad? You're 3 months in as Minister for Education there or thereabouts.
Yeah.
By the time your tenure ends, however long that might be,
Yeah.
what do you want to have achieved?
Look, I think that question's always put to politicians, and and I remember a politician talking about his legacy one time and all that. But I think we're not being honest in our job if we kind of focus on something that we can be remembered for. I think if there's one thing that I would like to leave in terms of maybe my impact in this job, is to create that environment that we actually are working Lechela, we are working together. And one of the biggest impediments I've found in the last 20 years, it might seem a very, very simple thing, but it's communication. And for example, there's principals in this room, and they're trying to communicate a message on a particular day when they're under pressure, teaching principles for one, and they're trying to get through to somebody, and maybe that's not happening, or maybe they try another day. Simple, effective communication, and that is something that I want to work on. I've already discussed it with my officials. We're very fortunate with 1,300 people working in the department, and the feedback I get from principals is there's good people in there. If it's an extension of the classroom, pass on my thanks to such and such work in the building unit in Tullamore. They're doing a great job. But I think we can always improve communication systems, and that is something I want to develop, and maybe bring a bit of maturity to the relationship. And I think the IPPN you're doing that. I got a sense at the end, the same sense at the APD in Galway at the beginning of my tenure. But the other bit is to try to work together in sort of grappling with the enormous societal changes as well, and to be part of that.
Will you stay there, Minister? Because I think David has a small presentation that he would like to make to you.
Thanks, David.
Now, what this is, just so you know, Minister, it's appropriately you talking about takeíocht, it's the IPPN mission statement, support, motivation and courage, and it's from the Wild Goose Studios in Kinsale in Cork.
Goedemiddag, David.